To confirm, the meeting is now live.
Okay, so good evening, everybody, and for those watching online, I'm Councillor Lee Dillon, the Chairman of the Joint Public Protection Committee. Would like to welcome you all to the meeting. Before we start, I'd like to explain the benefits for the members of the public who may be watching that tonight's meeting is being held both over Zoom with councillors present in the council chamber at West Berkshire Council. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. The other committee members in attendance are Councillors Gilby and Councillors Allen from Bracknell Forest, Councillor Phil Barnett and Howard Wollaston from West Berkshire Council. Members are being supported by a number of officers from the two partner authorities, including from the Public Protection Partnership. They are in attendance either in person or remotely. So for any votes, members of the committee present in the chamber are the only ones who can take part in the formal decision. They will be asked to vote by raising their physical hands. Thank you. So we move on to item 1, which is apologies. Please, Stephen.
No apologies for absence, Chairman, although Councillor Ikander Jeffries is running late, I believe.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Item 2 are the minutes. Are members happy that these are an accurate record of the meeting held on the 11th of December? Are there any suggested edits to those? No. So if I propose those from the chair, and seconder.
Chair, Councillor Gilby, I'm happy to second.
Lovely, thank you. And all those in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. I move on to item 3, which is the outstanding actions from the previous meeting. If Moira Fraser could provide an update, please.
Chairman, there's just 2 of the matters that remain outstanding. In terms of the legislative changes for the Hunting Trophies Act, we will make sure that when we do the service provision and the priority setting for this year, that's captured in within that. And in terms of the work on the lobbying the government in terms of statutory fees, that's still work in progress.
Thank you. Any questions from members on that? No. Okay. Item 4 are declarations of interest. I don't see any hands, so I'll move on. Item 5 is public questions, and there have been no public questions received which relate to a general issue concerned with the work of the JPPP or an item on the agenda. Item 6, forward plan. So pages 15 to 18 in your pack. Are there any additional changes that members want to see made on the forward plan? And officers, any late additions that you're suggesting? No. Okay, excellent. So item 7, and we do have Mr. Winstanley joining us remotely. So members, before I ask John to introduce this item, I'd just like to take a moment to reflect on the reasons the partnership was set up in the first place. Almost 3 years ago to this day, on the 13th of March 2021, 3-year-old Dylan Milsom tragically died after falling into the Kennington Avon Canal near Victoria Park while he was feeding the ducks. Our heartfelt condolences go out to his family and friends at what must be an incredibly difficult time of the year for them. Following that tragic accident, the Water Safety Partnership was set up to bring together a number of agencies to improve water safety in the district. So I would like to invite John Winstanley to introduce the annual report that is brought to this committee at the request of West Berkshire Council's executive. I'm also pleased to note that following last year's JPPC meeting, Bracknell Forest Council have also now joined the Water Partnership too. John, if I could ask you to introduce the report, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so the as you mentioned, the Water Safety Partnership was set up in March 2021 following that tragic incident. The partnership is between West Berkshire Council, Canal and River Trust, Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue, Thames Valley Police, the National Health Service, South Central Ambulance Service, and of course now attended by Bracknell Forest Council colleagues. So other Berkshire authorities also attend, including Wokingham and Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. So it's very much a knowledge sharing across Berkshire. The objectives of the partnership are to promote and develop water safety initiatives, promote awareness of water safety risks, share best practice amongst authorities and experts, experts, and Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue are very much the experts in this area, to work in partnership to look at data and provide a targeted approach to water safety, and to be a focus group for responding to water-related incidents. And ultimately, it's to minimise accidental drowning across West Berkshire, Bracknell, and the wider Berkshire where we can help. The report itself sort of includes some information and some striking statistics on accidental drowning in the UK, which is of note. Lots of people sort of who succumb to accidental drowning don't set out to go into the water at all when they're on the travel. So the group is really very, very much about sort of educational and alerting to the dangers. Sadly, there has been one accidental drowning in West Berkshire in the last 12 months involving an incident on the Kennedy-on-Avon Canal, which occurred at Newbury at night. So this is investigated by representatives of the Water Safety Partnership. And whilst there was no reasonable physical measures that could have been prevented this in particular incident, we did talk to street pastors and the nighttime economy in Newbury to try and spread the word regarding the dangers of water at night. So we did what we could in terms of, sort of education in that area. The report also details 2 vulnerable users in the Salvation Army in Newbury that fell into the canal at Northcroft. We are looking at introducing measures along with the landowner where these particular users of the Salvation Army fell into the canal. So we are taking some physical measures that we can do to try and prevent that in the future. 4 meetings of the partnership took place in the last 12 months, and activities include water safety training days, open water swimming training, messaging around water safety and heat waves and flooding, 2 very contrasting events that we've had over the last 12 months, unfortunately. Further development of the Public Protection Partnership website as a central resource for water safety education and promotional material. Also, we've introduced an additional water safety cabinet at Northcroft, where we know there's been incidents of people sort of while water swimming and people throwing themselves in the canal, and also numerous hours of water safety education, particularly by Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue, and other joint promotional activities. Attached to the report is a calendar of events over the coming years that the water safety team will be attending and promoting, with a particular focus over the coming 12 months on how we can get the message to the harder to reach groups, including initiatives like QR codes to link to educational materials at known hotspots. And we're trialling this in Pangbourne, where we know there's a particular issue with people launching themselves from Whitchurch Bridge. So we've done some educational activities in that area. Now we're going to try some QR codes to see if we can get some hits on that to the educational promotional activities. So any questions?
Members, any questions? Yeah, Councillor Gilby.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of questions, but perhaps with the Chair's indulgence, I'd like to tell my own story, not for personal indulgence, but to emphasise the seriousness with which the committee takes this task. I would be, as was used in the council vernacular, a near miss when I was a child. When I was 7, I was out with my parents by Virginia Water Lake in Runnymede District, and my parents, as indeed any child will say, were the absolute best parents, but it's very difficult keeping an eye on your child 100% of the time. And really, I say that because this sort of thing really can happen in sheer seconds. It can turn from a fun day out into tragedy. My parents were trying to get across this shallow bit of the river. I'd got across earlier, and of course, being very young, the first thing I want to do is wander off on my own. I walk down further along the lake and I decide, whatever possessed me to think this, how deep is this section of the lake? Purely a childhood curiosity. And I put my foot in to see whether I could reach the bottom. Couldn't. Went in further. Couldn't. And you can see where this is going. I lost my balance. Now, that in itself wouldn't be a tragedy, except I was wearing Wellington boots. So as you go into the river, of course, the water fills the boots and acts as ballasts, drawing you down. And long story short, the abiding memory I can remember of that is reaching near the bottom, and I can see the river barrier in front of me, and I have my eyes wide open. Still remember how dirty the water was. And I can just remember breathing in and out water. I got to that point, and I don't remember struggling. I just remember breathing in and out water. Somehow, I'd managed to get one of my Wellington boots off, and I shot straight to the top. But if I hadn't managed to get it off, I have not a doubt that I wouldn't be here today. And that's why I think this work, it's very important, but it strikes close to home. And I hope for anyone who might be watching, we do take this with the seriousness that it deserves. And I was especially pleased to see, for example, in reading the material that we have online, there's a lot of talk about the water safety code online, including the important thing about staying together, emphasising to both children and adults that when you're near water, you should never let children be on their own, even for a split second, because tragedy can happen. And I hope my own story emphasises that point. So before I go into any questions, I'll reserve unless anyone else wants to say anything. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing that with the committee and the wider public. I think it's an example that unfortunately is all too familiar across the country, you know, where we see young children get into difficulty in the waterways. And hopefully that recollection of that event in your past will make people think twice and take on board your advice that you keep your children absolutely within eyeshot. I've got 3, 11 and under, so you can imagine them all scurrying off. But as you said, to keep an eye on them and make sure that you're near them as well. I think Councillor Candy wants to, Jeffrey, sorry, wants to speak, and then we'll come back to you, Councillor Gilby. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to comment to Mr. Winstanley, it's great to see the addition of QR codes in the communication pack. We do know technology has moved on, and the kids are, especially the younger generation, QR codes are a lot easier to swipe, point their camera at and get information. So thank you very much for that addition. Yeah, I'd like to say that's a really good addition to it. Thank you, Chair.
And then if I could come back to Councillor Gilby for some questions, and then I've just got a couple of comments to make at the end too.
Thank you, Chair. Somewhat related to my case, actually. Obviously, there will be some near misses that we don't necessarily know about. In my case, as soon as I shot straight to the top, my parents were rather more worried about getting me home and to the doctor to see if there'd be any problems. And indeed there were. I swallowed half the Thames. But obviously, how do we try and account for the idea that there may be cases that we aren't aware of? How do we try and account for that? And perhaps if I can ask the second question at the same time, obviously we have resources online. Can you perhaps speak generally to how we actually try and get these resources out there to the parents and children? Because obviously if they don't know where to go online, they might not necessarily be aware of it. But perhaps specific to that point, you do mention that there is a schools training programme. Could you elaborate on what form that takes, please? Thank you.
Yeah, with regards to near misses, it is very difficult to get that information. It is reliant on, I suppose, people. You know, like you say, it's not the. I think people are just happy that they've survived, or that they've got away with one, if you like. But it's very difficult to get that information on near misses. It does rely on reporting through to Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue or the police, or people sort of reporting it through to ourselves or via the Public Protection Partnership. But that probably is a message that we can get out there. I mean, we do rely on Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue a lot for our information and for our data on this. So I can ask them the question as well, what reporting mechanisms they may have out there. With regards getting to parents and children, yeah, what we tend to target some of our events around locations where we know there's parks, Victoria Park, sort of in Newbury. You've got Pangbourne. You've got the large sort of park and open space there where we target some of our promotional activities. I mean, and then numerous other places. But also, the Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue go into schools and do their water safety talks to the children. So they're very active on that, and I can get you lots more information on that, if you like, Councillor Gilby, from colleagues at Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue, who will be able to give you a chapter and verse, I have no doubt.
That would be much appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, and Moira?
Councillor Gilby, also just to say that during the summer months, we take the Water Safety Partnership on the road, and we go to Wingfield, Warfield, parish. We go to quite a few of the parish open days that you have in Bracknell, and then some events in West Berkshire as well.
Thank you. I'd had a briefing last week around tonight's meeting, and John came along to talk a bit about the partnership. And obviously, we've just experienced flooding across the area. And actually, if you go down the Kennet and Avon Canal at the moment, the river, or sorry, the fields are still flooding over the towpath into the canal. So there's also just that general being safety aware, but also in flood events as well. And I think we're pushing some more comms out on that, John, aren't we? To remind people to be cautious in such conditions.
Yeah, we had a water safety partnership meeting today, and that was the main topic. It was a discussion with Royal Berkshire Fire and Rescue colleagues who were also very keen to get that message out across Berkshire, and we'll join in with that, and we'll get the message out there as well, because it is a concern, especially where people are walking in remote areas. I mean, there's obviously issues with people driving into floods, which, I mean, as highways as well, I know that all too well, people ignoring road closures and thinking they can get through the water. But I suppose the most serious concern is when people are out and about walking in remote locations and don't realise that their usual walking routes are completely flooded. So it's getting that message out there. Absolutely. Councillor Dillon will be looking at that over the next few days.
That's excellent. Thank you, John. Just the last one is so actually Councillor Gilby retelling his incident when I think I was 3. So I don't remember this at all, but I was in a bright red sort of zip up jumpsuit, and I'd ended up in next door neighbour's back garden and fallen in their pond. And it was only the buoyancy of that suit that actually kept me up. And then Ray, the next door neighbour, saw us out the window and came out in the garden. So I wonder actually if there's any advice that we can just provide around private ownership of ponds, and particularly of swimming pools. I mean, if you look at the new membranes you can cover a pool over with now, you can just walk straight across it. They're that safe. They can take the whole weight of an adult rather than sort of sinking down. And I suspect if you did an aerial search of West Berkshire, you'd still find quite a few homeowners with private pools. And I would say the same probably for your council areas as well. But excellent.
That's something I can take to the partnership.
Lovely. Thanks, John. Okay, so that item is for information, so there's no need to vote. Thank you, John, for presenting that, and pass our thanks back to the other members of the partnership when you next meet them, please. And we will move on from there. So item 8 is the Public Protection Partnership Service update. So as is usual practice for this item, I'll work through each section of the report and ask officers if they have anything they would like to highlight, and then invite questions from members. So without further ado, if I can hand over to Sean to kick us off, please.
Yes, so this is the, thank you, Chairman. This is the report that's received by the committee every meeting. It'll be a familiar format to the members of the committee. There is a narrative report, and then there is some data in the appendix to the report. So the way the report is structured, it deals with some of the key, I suppose, overarching issues such as finance, customer satisfaction, HR, and then there'll be an opportunity for the officers that are on the call, my colleagues George, Lawrence, Rosner-Gator, and Moira as well, who is obviously in the room basically to address any of the questions that members may have.
Okay, so if we start then, so section 5 is finances and resources. So Sean, I don't know, probably much to
I'll pick that up. So as you can see, basically, it's now looking like the income shortfall for the service for the year will be 95,000, which is primarily where it's been most of the year. It did drop a little bit, and it looked like we were going to be sort of in the 80s, but it's edged back up now to 95,000. That's primarily a shortfall in licensing income that's really been sort of there since the pandemic. Really, we lost a number of license holders. We've also basically been trying to deliver a managed underspend for the service, really, or for the councils, I guess is the way to put it. So both authorities are facing significant pressures, and we have managed an underspend of around about £200,000, basically, which will be used to offset the pressures in the authorities. That has primarily come from vacancies, and it's come from vacancies which will be which have already been offered up, basically for deletion to balance the budget in 24-25. So overall, I think the position is that we've managed not just this underspend, this managed underspend, but we've also managed to cover off the 95,000 shortfall in income as well this year.
Thank you. Any questions for Sean, members at all? No, Howard looked like half an arm there. Yeah. Oh, yeah, please, Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Chair. Sean, just so we had the additional 250k and then minus the 95k. So does that leave us in plus?
So no, we've made a number of successful grant funding applications over the year, and there's been a whole range of them, from investigation grants through to grants for public health work, and other very specific areas such as community safety messaging. So you'll have seen perhaps some of the initiatives on our social media site that we've done around electrical safety and other areas. So effectively, some of that money has been used basically to offset some of our costs, because we've basically effectively allocated officers to those grant funded areas. So that grant funding is in addition, but some of it has obviously been spent particularly with investigations on legal fees and also based on additional staffing as well for the service. So a little bit of it's gone basically to offset some of our costs by using some of our staff for the grant funded work or paying for their time, as it were. But the vast majority has come from managing vacancies with a view to delivering this the savings required.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I mean, the report mentions the 95k shortfall, but you mentioned in your talk, but it's not mentioned in the report, about the underspend from savings by by not recruiting and stuff like that. It would be useful if the report included that bit to say that you are balancing the 95k by using that underspend, because otherwise it's not clear. It looks like, initially you just read this, you think actually we're 95k short. Where are we going to get that from?
Yes, I take your point, actually. I mean, I think what I've said there is that basically, because the way I've looked at it is that we're reporting a zero outturn. So a zero outturn being that there will be no underspend to carry forward, there'll be no overspend to carry forward into next year, because the money will return to the authorities in effect, or it will be used to offset pressures within the authorities. But you're absolutely right. Yes, I'll look at that certainly in terms of the drafting of the reports going forward to make sure that's much clearer.
Thank you. Yeah, please, Damien.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is obviously Q3 report as well. So I think when we get to the outturn of Q4, it will become much clearer, and you'll be able to see all the figures in and out. So thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you for that addition. Okay, no, if nothing else on finance, we'll move on then, please, to customer satisfaction rates, freedom of information. Moira.
So, Chairman, this quarter, we have had a decline in the satisfaction rates where it's gone down to 52%. We are expecting by year end to achieve the target of 75, because we're still tracking at 72% over the whole year. Also, just to say that the numbers are really small, so it's quite difficult to if you have a small number of people change. It says 11 out of 21 people were happy, 10 were less happy. But if you look at the overall number, we had just about 2,500 service requests. And if you think 10 people out of 2,500, it's 0.004% of the people that aren't happy. It also needs to be looked at in the context of the number of complaints we've had. So we have had one complaint within the quarter. And we've also, if you look at the report, I think the part that perhaps we don't always have a look at is the number of compliments that we've had in the service. And those are just a sort of a flavour of them. So although the satisfaction has dropped off, we think that it will be back up to where it needs to be by year end.
Thank you for that, Moira. Any questions from the floor? No. And thank you for explaining the rationale between the drop in satisfaction. I think a smaller sample number, but still looking good for year to date projections. Okay, moving on then to item 7 in the report, which is HR, human resources. Sean?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So I can give a bit of an update on this. So having explained at this meeting and previous meetings that obviously a number of the vacancies will be deleted, we are in the process of trying to fill a number of vacancies within the service, and the report alludes to that. So we just had the recruitment to the housing team. So this is private sector housing that has now closed. I'm hopeful that of the 2 vacancies, we should be able to recruit to one of those, and Rosalind may have an update when we get to the housing section. And then obviously in the licensing team, which is broken down into 2 areas, one of them is the application side of it, and one of them is the other side being the enforcement side. So we have had no less than 5 roles out to advert in that team. So there was 2 in applications, or we're looking to recruit to 2 in applications. We are looking to recruit 2 licensing officers and a lead licensing officer for enforcement. One of the licensing officer posts is still open, but what I am pleased to report is that we have got applicants to interview for all of the other roles. And we will be interviewing over the next fortnight or so. So, in fact, most of the interviews are this week, I believe, for that. I just want to stress one other area of this, and that is around basically the work that we're doing, obviously around staff development, which is clearly basically where the committee agreed we should go in terms of trying to develop the service. All of the level 4 trainees should be endpoint assessment stage. In fact, either between the next couple of weeks and the next few months and August, basically. So hopefully they will be able to move, and they are now being allocated. And I think it's really important. They've all now been allocated to effectively teams where they will be working longer term. We've also basically got a number of apprentices progressing well at level 6. So we've got 2 progressing through the training standards level 6 apprenticeship, one progressing through the environmental health level 6 apprenticeship, and we've got 2 existing members of staff doing postgraduate qualifications as well as a graduate trainee within environmental health. So although obviously we're losing a number of posts basically over the next 12 months to balance the budget, we have had this succession plan in place, which hopefully basically over the next few years will see us in a good position, because recruitment as we've seen recently, we've been very fortunate with licensing jobs to get applications, but recruitment of qualified, let's say, environmental health officers, training standards officers remains very, very difficult.
But I mean, if you can pass on our congratulations to those individuals for completing their next milestone. Councillor Barnett, please.
Through you, Chairman. Thanks for that information, Sean. Obviously, it must have been concerning regarding the staff that are imminent, either leaving or retiring or whatever they might be deciding to undertake. And it's also helpful, I'm sure, for your department that you're trying to bring on other members to fulfill some of the obligations which you need to undertake. My main concern is that, are you able to thoroughly say that at this moment in time that all your mandatory inspections and activities that are required to be undertaken within the department are being carried out? That's all I really wanted to know, Sean.
So thank you for that, Councillor Barnett. So in relation to retirements, a number of these vacancies have been caused by retirements, come about as a result of retirements. We obviously planned for that eventuality, whilst not necessarily knowing when people were going to retire. But obviously that was part of a succession planning. We have actually, so one of the areas obviously that licensing we've talked about, where basically there have been a number of vacancies. We have actually trained our trainees in a number of areas around enforcement in that area. For example, and more recently, we've had staff from across the service, for example, doing operator license checks and other areas. And we are prioritising the areas of highest risk in terms of what staff we can allocate to those areas. The one thing that I have, I think one of the strengths of the service, being the type of service it is, which effectively covers a couple of areas and many different subjects, is we do try and engender within the service a whole service responsibility among staff. Which is really important, though. So it doesn't really matter if your background is in X, Y, or Z. If the need is in A, B, or C, then basically we would expect people to go and assist in those areas. And our staff are authorised really to work in areas, any areas where the management of the service believe they're competent to work with the necessary training. Yes, in answer to that's a very long answer to a very precise question, but in reality,
the answer is yes.
The answer is the answer is yes. I mean, clearly, basically, when you're carrying the number of vacancies we are carrying, then you know, balancing that resource. So if we've moved resource from one area to another, then it will effectively mean that some work doesn't get in that other area, doesn't get done in that other area.
But you're prioritising and managing that risk, aren't you? So, yeah. Excellent. Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Allen, then Councillor Gilby, please.
Yeah, in paragraph 7.3, it mentions about sickness absence in the commercial team, putting the food inspections back or not being done on time. It does mention about putting additional resources into the team, but how long do you think it will be before they've caught up with their food inspections and get them back on track?
So we were doing. I mean, Rosalind will perhaps cover this when she gets to her bit, but we were doing well against the kind of catch-up programme. Although you'll see from later on in the report, we have dealt with a number of issues in relation to food premises. What we have done, and this goes back to really the point I was just making before, Councillor Allen. So we have sought members of staff from other areas within the service who are looking to basically regain, because certain areas of work like health and safety, like food safety, there are very specific legal competence requirements. Same with things like inspections of HMOs and housing and things like this. So what we're trying to do is to use staff from across, say, the environmental health part of the service, asking them to re-get their competence back up, and then offering them basically, in some cases, additional work to help basically keep the programmes on track. Because obviously the most cost efficient work for us is to allow staff to do additional visits and things like that if they can. We've also successfully recruited within the food safety team 2 casual members of staff.
Yes, but the questions about the programme, when we're going to.
Well, I think, sorry, going back
Ross answer that more directly.
So Rosalind will answer, Rosalind will answer that more directly, but I mean, I'll let her explain where she thinks we are with the programme. Sorry.
So if we should we hold that question till we get to that part of the report later, Councillor Allen?
That's fine, yeah.
Lovely, thanks. I'm sure Rosalind heard that, so would have made a note to cover that when she gets to Councillor Gilby, please.
Thank you, Chair. A comment rather than a question. Whilst we clearly have a long-term strategy for our workforce, it's quite clear in the short term that it's how can we put it, a challenging work environment right now with the level of vacancies and the amalgamations that are taking place. And really, I'd like to say to the officers here in the room and online and further afield from all of us at the committee, thank you for the excellent work you do, especially as not just unique to the PPP, but in many sectors of local government, there are those pressures, and it is putting more pressures on the existing staff. I can imagine it is challenging, and so thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you. That's very much appreciated, and we'll pass that back on to the rest of the service. One thing, actually, just final thing on the HR side of it. In some of these areas, I just really should add that we have basically got the go-ahead to bring in a couple of agency staff where the pressures are really high, because I think that's important, basically, that we maintain that level.
Thank you. Move on to ICT, and given that the report's only 3 lines long, I suspect debate won't be too long, but Councillor Allen might have a question on the system. Over to you, Sean.
I haven't really got much to add. I mean, Domain. I know I spelled your name wrong there, Damien. So Damien and I basically have an ongoing dialogue with the supplier here, but by and large, a lot of the operational functionality of the system is there. The big issue for us now basically is getting the customer portal operational. but a lot of the areas have been fixed, and that the issues that are now coming, I believe, and my operational colleagues may say something to this, are basically being dealt with by the software suppliers help desk now.
Thank you. So just a question from me is, have we got a target date for the customer portal? And that's Councillor Jeffrey's question as well. So. And Councillor Gilby's question. Yeah.
I think it's ongoing, isn't it? I mean, Damien, it is something that we raise every time, and it is a really important aspect of the system, because obviously this is what was going to deliver the efficiencies for the service, where effectively people could apply and pay for things online. That element of it is frustrating, but I think it's fair to say, Damien, that we are keeping on top of this and keeping the dialogue going with the company. I don't know if there's anything you want to.
Yeah, please, Damien.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I think this is probably the most challenging part of the system that we've come across. We are working very closely with the supplier. As the report says, Sean and I meet with the supplier on a monthly basis at a senior level to keep that pressure on. I wouldn't commit to a specific date, but we want to continue to keep that pressure onto the supplier and making sure that they deliver to a specification that we require.
Okay, I think what I'd like to see, even if it's in a Part 2 report, given its commercial nature, is as our officers, what is a target date that you are working to? And there will be various hurdles that you'll have to cross to get to that target date. But with any project plan, you need to have an end date in mind. Otherwise, your project will just drift. So if we can have that after the meeting, a schedule of your works and development pipeline for the portal, I think that'd be useful. Back to you, Damien.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, certainly something we can do. And I think the fact that we've discussed it and raised it here will help us in our negotiations with the supplier. So thank you, Chair.
I'm going to come back to Councillor Jeffreys, who had a second question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, two parts. So I'll go back to obviously the timeline. Do we know at what point we will get to some form of user accepted training? So I know we've got the portal. At what point does the portal get tested? Have we got a timeline on that as well?
I'm not sure about timelines for external customers, but we have now rolled out the service to the customer services team in both Bracknell and West Berkshire Council, and officers have undertaken training with them. So we would be using them in effect as a testing of the system.
So if we could add the UAT into the timeline as well for external users, I think that'd be useful.
Thank you, Chair. And then, sorry, there was one more. The last one is, I know we've stated that data was transferred over. Just a question on that. Do we know if there was any loss of data or corruption of data during that transfer? Because obviously we know systems never work as we intend them to do so.
I'll pick that one up if I can, Chair. Not as far as I'm aware, basically we haven't identified any loss of data. The data transfer was, I mean, as you'll be aware that transferring data from one system to another is hard work. Transferring data from three systems with three separate sets of coding was very hard work. I think probably is the best way of putting it, and it proved to be, I think, a lot more challenging for the supplier than I think they anticipated, and that has been the issue, and that's where the time that was lost has been. But we have got it transferred. We have got it all into format now, by and large, where it meshes. And I'm not aware, basically, of any data that was missing. There was one area that we identified around some documentation relating to some documentation, but that work was done subsequently by the supplier at no additional charge.
And Councillor Gilby.
Just a very quick comment to say that I think all our hearts fill with dread when we hear about IT transitions. Central government isn't exactly short of IT failures. So it really is a testament to the supplier and the officers that so far, touch wood, we've managed to bring this off without too much of a hitch, especially considering the challenges that were facing us. So congratulations to all involved so far.
Thank you very much. Oh, and Councillor Allen has got a question. There we go.
So I just have to caveat that it says not time to pop the champagne corks yet. So.
I think, yeah, carry on with the endeavours, but if members of the partnership can just have some further clarification on target dates, as said in a confidential note, then that would be appreciated. Thanks. Okay, moving on to property and asset. Moy, oh no, that's Sean. Sorry, Sean.
Yeah, there's nothing really to add at this stage. So, I mean, we were looking at some potential sharing of the building that we've got basically for public protection, but that's not likely to happen this financial year now. But there's nothing really to add to the very minimal bit of information that's
Thank you very much. Any questions at all? No. Okay, moving on. Item 10 is the operational delivery measure of the volumes. Moira.
So in terms of activity, our lead communication officer left the service in October, so we did have a slight dip in sort of activity around sort of Facebook posts and things like that. But we're now back up and running again, and if you and hopefully you all are following us on Facebook, you will see that the output's back up again. So if there are any particular areas where members feel that they would like to get some messaging out, please do let me know, and we'll make sure that that's followed through. We've also got somebody who's really good on Twitter, who's helping us with the Twitter posts as well now. Our number of website visits remains reasonably steady, and perhaps an area to focus on for this quarter is around articles and press releases going out.
Thank you. Any questions, Councillor Jeffries?
This might be a silly question, Moira. On the website, the articles, are we able to track how many individuals read the articles to give us a feel or kind of direction? Are we producing the right content for our readers?
We can get page view numbers, and I think the other thing to say is, and I've noticed this, that actually a lot of those do get picked up by local online kind of news media. I mean, even the last couple of weeks we've had some of those that have actually been run, so they get repeated, and we repeat them ourselves. So they're all basically on our Facebook feed, and then we put those onto a whole range of local, community forums, which actually probably are the news of today amongst the kind of lost cats and things. So, but we do post those, and we do know that there's a number of kind of repostings and everything else within those forums. But we can get the data. Actually, it's an interesting point. I mean, if you want us to have a look at whether we can get the data for the next meeting, just to give you a bit of an indication, we certainly do that, Councillor Jeffries.
Yeah, I mean, if we add some data in, then that'd be useful. I'm sure it's being read, all the time and effort being spent on crafting these messages. Any other questions? Councillor Williston?
Oh, sorry, the appendix.
Yeah, that's the appendix. Yes. That was what I called out. So I thought Moira was talking through that as well.
So the appendix appears to show that West Berkshire have nothing at all for envirocrime or fly tipping. It's all in Bracknell, which struck me as rather odd.
Yeah. Well behaved, right?
Or West Berkshire's been taking all their stuff to Bracknell.
Yeah.
The reason being is that the PPP aren't responsible for the enforcement of envirocrime in West Berkshire. Currently, it's done within the waste team. But actually, for completeness, I suppose we could look to include that. This is basically the table there is a summary of PPP activity, the shared service activity. But I mean, we could try and get that data for you so you can see what the comparison actually looks like. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and back to Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Sean. And this was raised in another meeting that I was part of. In terms of the data capture on locations, I don't think we actually are at a position to create a heat map and look at our hotspots. So it will enable us to try and target those hotspots, whether it's with CCTV deployment or other means. So is that something we can look into?
Yep, Damien.
Yeah, we know certainly in Bracknell Forest Borough where our hotspots are. We, as you know, have a dedicated officer who deals with fly tipping enforcement and does an amazing job out on the ground. He knows exactly where all of the hotspots are. He does have a number of cameras that he's got access to, which he rotates around those hotspots. And he is very active in both investigating fly tipping sources and also issuing fixed penalty notices. And you'll be aware, Councillor Jeffreys, that we have recently increased the fixed penalty notice fine for fly tipping, and that is hopefully having an impact on those people that do fly tip.
Thank you. Councillor Allen?
I believe we've just been awarded some money by the Police Crime Commissioner and an additional award to buy some additional CCTV cameras anyway, portable ones, so that I think it's 31,000, was it? Yeah, so I think that will help enormously as well.
Thank you. Are there anything else on the appendix measures? No. Okay. And then Moira, anything else to add on comms, consult and engage at all? On item 11.
Nothing specific, Chairman. The only thing to say is that we continue with our education pieces within the schools within West Berkshire, and certainly when we talk about the vaping report later on in this meeting, I'm sure George will expand on the work that we're doing within the schools around those areas.
Do we find a difference in engagement between academy schools and LEA schools at all? No, good. Any other questions from any members? No. Okay, moving on through to item 12, which is community and trading standards. I think this is George. If you could come on camera for us, George.
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess just leading on to Maura's final comment there. We are, obviously as a team, we do recognise that we need to be fully connected with our other services and stakeholders, and our performance report recognises that work that we've done around vaping, tobacco and alcohol, and the groups that we work with, such as Berkshire Youth, secondary schools, youth offending teams, commercial businesses, Newbury College, and of course the public health teams. That work also continues to be aligned with our enforcement and intelligence gathering, and that's demonstrated by the investigations around the sale of illegal and unsafe products and underage sales. And that extends then, in terms of underage sales, to areas such as lottery scratch cards and underage fireworks sales. Other areas of work include protecting victims from scams and fraud. We've delivered practical disruption tools such as fitting call blockers to households, delivered training sessions and presentations, as well as directly supporting 12 victims to retrieve over £38,000 as victims of fraud. And again, doing that in partnership with TVP, Trading Standard Services, and HMRC and local banks. The Thatcham Community Larder that we run on a weekly basis is very well utilised. And whilst this is only within the West Berkshire area, it's a platform for drop-in services and officers to give one-to-one trading standards related advice to those users, and that includes things around scams and just general other general areas that we're involved in. We have been busy promoting product safety over the last last quarter. This has been apparent in the work regarding our electric blanket testing, portable heater safety testing, as well as preparing for electric bike and e-scooter fire safety work that relates to lithium battery charging, and also looking at what we call button battery safety. That's kind of all the public health side, and then there's also the more traditional work that the officers are involved in, and not too dissimilar to food hygiene. Officers are involved in a programme of food standards inspections, and this involves assessing areas such as compliant labelling, composition, sampling. And as a report, you'll see that in November of last year, officers visited 23 food premises to assess food labelling from foreign imported foods, and it amounted to around 3,000 products in those stores being inspected. It was also the time for fireworks sales. Members may have read recently the article regarding a prosecution in Thatcham, which was the result of last season's inspection regime, because it's a licensable activity. And in this last season, we looked at 40 visits, which were all undertaken on premises registered to keep explosives. Officers have also completed 19 petroleum site inspections across PPP as part of its role in maintaining petroleum safety, and specialist officers around animal health and welfare and animal feeding staffs are ongoing with their programme as well. Another element of the team is the community team. That involves an awful lot of the work around direct work with residents, and particular things like noise nuisance complaints, pest complaints, assisted burials, drainage issues, those sorts of things. And that does remain a significant element of the work that we're involved in. And obviously with the flooding of late, that's increased some work areas as well. The service also manages the stray dog collection, and members will be aware of the changes of XL bully legislation that came in towards the end of last year and finally to February. And we have now secured some kennelling provisions for larger dogs, but the impact of that change in legislation hasn't been significant. So we're pleased with that outcome in essence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George, for that. Members, any questions? I know Councillor Barnett signalled during the debate.
Through you, Chairman, I'm interested in this comprehensive food sampling programme. Are you actually looking at ingredients against labelling, or are you looking at constituents of ingredients? Or obviously you've mentioned the non-new UK products, but how are you going about identifying what the products are and what the ingredients are within the products? Just intrigued to know, that's all.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, the programme will comprise of different types of testing and different types of food products and different settings. So, for example, it could be takeaway meals, or it could be imported foods, or whatever. We set all that out in the first instance. That we have that programme with the Food Standards Agency and also with our regional trading standards colleagues. And in essence, things are then set out prior to us actually sampling. In the main, it looks at the type, the labelling, descriptions, the composition of the food, and the making sure it's not, what's in there is in there, and there's no food adulteration, that sort of thing. So it's all set out in advance, and then when it goes to the lab will then look at all of the different constituent factors and then report back.
When I was at university, Tesco value sausages had more chicken in them than pork. I always remember reading the back and seeing that breakdown of ingredients. Worrying.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah. No. Okay. Thank you, George. We're now moving on to commercial, which is Roslyn, please. And then just to remind you as well, the question about how we get back on track for our testing programme from Councillor Allen.
Yes, if I start with that, so basically the officers in the commercial team, they do food and health and safety, so that's food hygiene as opposed to the food standards work that George has just discussed. So one of the main elements that they do is the reactive work in food and health and safety and in accident investigations. The other side of it then would be the programmed food inspection work that we've been talking about. And as I said in the report, we still are, I suppose, catching up from the COVID years. Officers during that time were all redeployed to COVID control and investigation into COVID. Also in that time, a lot of premises weren't open to be inspected anyway, so we couldn't get out to do the inspections. So that's really where we are. Now the FSA did have, and that's the Food Standards Agency, who are basically our regulators. During the COVID years and up until last year, they had a programme of getting back on track, if you like. And what that was concentrating on the higher risk food premises. So that's our A premises, which are done every 6 months. our B premises, which are done every year, and our C premises, which are done every 18 months, working on those premises and also on any of the higher risk unrated premises that come through. So that's really what we've been doing. So by the end of this year, we'll have done basically A, B, Cs, and any of the higher risk Ds and the high risk unrated. It's leaving us basically with the D risk premises still to do in the next year, plus all of the next inspection year's inspections as well, because they'll roll over and we'll get the new inspection year. Basically, we're coming to the end of the inspection year now. We've got another, would it be another 20 days to go? And then we move into the 24-25 inspection year. Now, because there's been less D premises done over the years and C premises, we're hoping that next year's inspections will be lower because we haven't been doing the bulk of them during COVID, and we can get back on track there. What we do have is we've got 2 casual staff that come in. We've got 1 officer back from maternity leave. As I say, we do have the officer off on long-term sick at the minute. She'll probably be off for another 2 months. What I've done with that is we've got an officer that does a lot of work with the SAG, the Safety Advisory Group. So we've reduced that work and brought in one of the apprentices to assist with that. So she's come back in now to do some food. So we're trying to bring, I suppose, as many officers back into food as we can. We've also, as Sean has said, we're looking at other officers across PPP to try to upskill them with our competency and authorisation to do food. So maybe we can utilise those next year. But it's mainly, as I say, the D premises that we're still working through. We'll get all of the high risk A, Bs and Cs done by the end of this year. I think one of the other big factors with what we're doing is we would, what we're finding is that premises, some of them aren't as compliant as they used to be. Now that's, I suppose, to do with there's the break with COVID, there's the cost of living, so they're not able to get as many people in to maybe do their deep cleaning, do their pest control services. So we are having to spend longer with certain premises, and that again takes away from us getting through and inspecting the rest. But it's the only way basically to ensure that those worst premises are compliant and that we bring them to comply with the legislation. So as I say, that's hopefully in a nutshell where we are with food inspections.
Okay, thank you, Rosalind. Before you go into the main body of your report, I'm just going to bring Sean back in for 1 second.
I think what Rosalind's saying is clearly prioritising highest, but we're not going to get the entire programme done for a whole variety of reasons. I suggest what we do, Chair, is that basically once we get through the end of year into April, that we produce basically a summary for the committee as to what end of year actually look like and what we're needing to carry forward. But just again to reassure the committee that we are prioritising those premises basically that need to be prioritised.
Thank you. That okay, Councillor Allen, back to you.
It was just to get some reassurance of how long it would take to sort of get back on track. So is it going to be a couple of months, or is it going to be the whole of next year to get back to where we should be?
For the higher risk, we'll be on track at the end of this inspection year, so at the end of this month. For the D premises and the lower risk unrated, is probably going to be all of next year. We'll still be working on those outstanding ones.
Okay, thank you for that, Rosalind.
Can I just add one thing? Actually, we've also basically, I was saying that we've allocated the trainees now to teams. We have a trainee who is particularly ex-retail, interested in food, ex-retail management, and in fact, basically, he's starting his qualification to be a food inspector later this year. So again, that will add some more capacity. But I'll give you the figures end of year, Councillor Allen. Thank you.
Thanks. And then Rosalind, back to you for anything else that you want to draw out under section 13 commercial, please.
I think the food inspections are probably the main thing that we've been concentrating on this year. As I say, apart from any of the reactive work that comes through to the team to do, we're running with quite a few major accidents that we're investigating as well. And as I said before, the enforcement work that we're doing. But I think the discussion about the food inspections is probably the main area that we're doing there.
That's lovely, thank you. And members, any other questions at all on this section? No. Okay, thank you very much, Rosalind. We'll move on to item 14, licensing. This is back to Sean.
I'm going to be really quick, Chairman, because I'm really conscious of time now. Just to say that there was two policies adopted in Q3. One of them was the Bracknell Forest Hackney Carriage and Private Hire policy, and also the West Berkshire policy in relation to the Licensing Act 2003. And you can see there, basically, we've also had a significant number of premise license hearings as well, which is the most we've had for many, many years. And we know that we've got more coming up, as you can see, at 14.5. So I'll stop there.
But a good sign in more applicants licenses coming in. You were saying from COVID, there'd been a decrease. So maybe that is the market starting to come back in that sector. I thought Councillor Wollaston would have declared an interest. His local's on here as he's moved to Boxford. Any other questions from members at all? Councillor Barnett.
The only point I was going to make, and it's not really a political point, but it's probably concerning West Berkshire, is the amount of subcommittees that we're having to undertake, which I would imagine takes a lot of resources for Moira and the rest of the admin team, as well as obviously the professional officers doing the investigations. So, I have a little concern that, a lot of effort is put into some of these subcommittee possible hearings that then the day or so beforehand are resolved. But the work still needs to go on leading up to that point. And it's really just an observation for you, Chairman, to Sean. Is there any other way that we might be able to consider cutting down the effort that's put into preparing the papers for these cases that don't take place?
Thank you, Councillor Barnett.
I think in relation to basically preparing the papers, there is a format for all of that, and we need to follow that format. I mean, you're right that some of them do get resolved just a few days or even a day or two beforehand. But I mean, we have a very similar thing basically with legal cases as well. I mean, we can get ready for a trial that might be set for 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And then basically at the beginning of the trial, there's a guilty plea. But I guess if you're not ready, you're facing a real problem if it goes ahead. So Moira, I don't know if there's anything.
Chairman, as you know, we have limited times prescriptive times within which licensing hearings have to take place. And it's usually 20 working days after the consultation period closes. And what we do tend to do, and we work closely with our colleagues in Democratic Services, is to make sure that we push those meetings to close to the 20th day as we possibly can, which will allow time for mediation and for the matters to be resolved before the hearing. So although they get cancelled, we do sort of consider them to be a success in that sense.
Is there any trend analysis of the ones that have been cancelled? What the reasons were that could then look to us to improve our communications out, or the ease of the form, anything like that?
We can look at that, but I think each case is really unique, and it's really where the strength of the objections and perhaps the nature of the objections. If it's around sort of closing time, the applicants may be happy to put it, change the hours ever so slightly, but where they sort of more significant concerns about locations and things like that, obviously you can't resolve them simply by negotiation.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? No. Okay, moving on to item 16, environmental quality. Rosalind, back to you.
I was going to say for this one that Suzanne McLaughlin's online also. She's the principal officer for that area, so I think she'll probably do a better job than me on that one.
No, yeah, certainly. Thank you. Suzanne, sorry for not bringing you in, Suzanne.
Chair, did you want to cover housing, or are we going to do environmental quality first?
Let's, while we've got you on the screen, let's
Okay.
do environmental quality, and then we'll do housing after.
Okay, thank you. I think as you can see here in section 16, the main crux of the work on top of the normal day-to-day has been the air quality work, which is obviously subject to the next report to the committee. Other areas of key activity include the annual private water supply return, which was submitted on time. Now that covers just West Berkshire, as there are no known private water supplies in Bracknell Forest. Basically, we're required there to do to provide the Drinking Water Inspectorate with a series of information to do with the type of supply, their risk assessment, results of sampling, etc. Regarding complaint work, we've had a variety of noise and other nuisance complaints in the last quarter. They've ranged from pubs and clubs, etc., to golf clubs and increased number from construction sites, and then some quite more detailed industrial premise noise from plant, where officers carried out quite a specific noise assessment to determine that there was a statutory nuisance and abatement notice served. We're also coming towards the end of the financial year for an inspection year for pollution prevention and control work, and up to the end of Q3 we had carried out more than 2/3 of those inspections, and we're on track to meet that deadline by the end of March. I think that's all I need to say on that. We're going to cover air quality later.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Any questions on what was just tabled? No. Okay, lovely. Thank you. So if we go back, sorry, just to item 15, environmental health housing. As just for transparency, I work for a registered social landlord, but they're not named in this report, so that's a good thing. Rosalind, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so for housing for Q3, the officers were continuing with the reactive workload that comes in, and obviously coming into the winter, we usually expect the damp and mold cases to really rise. But I think what we've found in the last year is that the numbers haven't really gone down to the level that they had been in previous years anyway. So we've continued with quite a lot of damp and mold cases coming through. And that, again, they did go up over the winter, but the peak wasn't as steep because it's remained steep in the year. We are working with the HMO licenses at the minute. Now, it's coming up to 5 years since a change of legislation brought a bulk of HMO licenses into us. And because they are renewed every 5 years, we now have the renewal of those. So we have probably about 60 or 70 renewals to do this year for HMOs, which in normal years we would have between 5 and 15 renewals. So we do have a lot of work to do with the HMO renewals this year. We're also trying to investigate unlicensed HMOs. So we're doing quite a lot of work with that, just to target areas that we feel that there would be unlicensed HMOs, and also where there's intelligence coming through, we're investigating those. The officer base, as Sean said, we have done interviews for 2 posts, and we're hopeful that we'll get one of those posts filled. But the person will need to be trained in housing. They have a slight background, but not in enforcement. What we have been doing is we've been looking at upskilling officers that are in PPP at the minute that used to do housing. So we're getting a lot of training in housing done so we can bring them in to do things like the HMOs, the HMO visits that are coming through, which will leave the officers in the team to be able to carry on with the reactive workload. And yes, I suppose that's the main areas that we've been working on. With housing as well as the commercial work, we do find that we are getting more complex cases and more enforcement cases through. And again, we're really putting that down to the cost of living crisis. People haven't got the money to do the repairs, and so we're having to take more formal action with them to get things done. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. I just wonder, for the HMOs, would it be possible to have a list by ward? Because in terms of intelligence, I think one ward members would be really interested to know if they've got HMOs in their backyard, so to speak. And then also what, maybe a briefing note on the required standard or the top 10 things that might concern you. Because again, if we're out and about in our wards, knocking on doors, you know, doing whatever, we're part of that intelligence base for you.
Yeah, that's completely doable. What we are trying to do with HMOs this year, I should say, is we're trying to map them. So know our licensed HMOs and any that we suspect of being unlicensed. We're going to try to map them using iDocs and the GIS system. So that might be helpful as well. We're going to try to work with the Intel team on doing that. And yeah, we can pull together some information. We've got that for you. Thanks.
Lovely, thank you. Any questions? Yeah, Councillor Williston.
I've got a couple of damp and mould issues in my ward. I just wonder whether it might be helpful to all members if there was literally a one-side briefing on just what teeth we have, what the process is. So I think most members, I suspect that both authorities don't really understand it.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we do have a leaflet that we can send out as well, and we can send out to you, but we can do a one-page brief on how we actually deal with things like that.
Not a massive report, please.
No, it won't be.
Yeah, I was going to say actually, and the leaflet probably has the information in which I was going to suggest, which is quick advice that you can give to residents, because obviously working in housing, I see quite a bit of damp and mold, and often it's not necessarily the fabric of the building that's causing it. It could be lifestyle. So, for example, drying your clothes indoors, well, that moisture has to leave your clothes, and it ends up in your walls. You know, so there's stuff like that about keeping your windows open while you're cooking. All just genuine practical tips to help reduce damp and mold. That's a good spot. Is that Claire? Yeah, Claire. Yeah.
Well spotted. So I was just thinking about the information we can provide. Obviously, there's about the damp and mold issue, but I think there's quite a bit of uncertainty again for residents about what's actually regulated. So I mean, from Councillor Williston said, you know, what is it that, how many have we got in our ward and so on? Not everything is regulated, so certain HMOs don't need permission, either a license or planning permission. So it might actually help just setting that out in a briefing note to members, so that they're aware that even though if we provide information about what's in their area, essentially that's not catching everything, because certain things do not need permission. So I think that would be helpful just to clarify.
Yeah, and I agree, Claire. Thanks for that addition. Members, any other comments or questions on housing? No. Rosalind, anything else from you on housing?
Nope, that's fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We move on to item 17, investigation and case management.
Thanks, Chair. It's all there in the report. Just to say that we're still encountering delays with the Crown Court system, but I think anybody that's read the news will be aware that that's a problem. The government's looking at options around that, and just a very, very, I suppose, a fair volume of very, very complex investigations now.
And any questions at all for Sean? No. Okay. Well, thank you for yourself and officers for taking us through that Q3 report. Lots of good progress continues to be made. We'll move on, and that's only to note, so there's no need to vote. Item 9 is the Crowthorne AQA plan and the air quality management area update, including Thatcham. So, Suzanne, I believe you're going to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. So, if members recall, this report follows on from the last committee in December, where we brought to that meeting the details for the revocation of the Bracknell, Newbury and Thatcham air quality management areas and the requirement for the statutory consultation of the Crowthorne Air Quality Action Plan. So since the last committee, the consultation for those 4 items has taken place, and this report details when the consultation took place, the responses that we received and the next steps to be taken. What is also included in the report, obviously, is the revised and updated Air Quality Action Plan for Crowthorne, and that includes details and feedback in relation to the statutory consultation for that action plan. The report details who responded, what their responses were, and how those details have been incorporated into the action plan. The action plan itself, as you can see in Appendix A, is a lengthy document, and we have used a template to put that plan together. It's a document which has been put together by colleagues across Bracknell Forest Council, not just environmental health part of PPP. It is, as you will see, very transport related in its measures. And as you'll also see from the report, the measures themselves have been put in an element of a priority order through a cost benefit analysis exercise, which was some feedback that we received from DEFRA to that effect, in order to give Bracknell Forest quite specifically something to aim for, something to prioritise in order to reduce the levels of nitrogen dioxide within that location. So the report in front of you tonight, Chair, is requesting that you approve the action plan and that the 3 air quality management areas for Bracknell, for Newbury and Thatcham proceed to be revoked. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Members, any comments or questions? Councillor Gilby, please.
Just a quick observation that this has been a key concern for residents living along the high street in Crowthorne. I know that they will be assured that we're hitting our targets and this action plan will endeavour to keep that target going for the next couple of years. So I'm very positive about this and thank the officers for the work they've put into this.
Thank you very much. And as the ward member for the Thatcham one as well, I know that there are those in Thatcham and on the town council who wish to have the air quality management area still in place, but maybe not for air quality reasons. So I'm happy to endorse the recommendations of the clerk or of the report too. Councillor Barnett.
Again, it's not so much a question, it's more an observation. I was quite intrigued with the results around our very well-known roundabout, the Burger King roundabout, but I think there's some correlation here in relationship to the use of electric cars, I think. If we look at 2018, it was 37.1%. And it's now at 28.2, and that's one's before COVID, the second one's after COVID, and there's increase in vehicle movements now. So does that really indicate there is more electric cars around that roundabout using the A339? It's a question for you, Sean. In the long term,
I guess, I mean, Suzanne will come in on that, but I think what we've seen is a gradual improvement in emission standards for vehicles. And obviously, as you say, basically there has been an increase in the use of electric vehicles. I know that, having lived around Newbury now trying to find charging points, basically that there has been an increase. But I mean, Suzanne, have you got anything to add to that?
I think that what I'd say is that we need to remember that this is not necessarily as a result of a change in vehicle fleet per se. It's as a result of people's changing working habits, shopping habits that was quite dramatic because of the COVID lockdowns and how people are now living their lives coming out of COVID. So that's quite clear when you're looking at quite specific, levels of pollution and traffic flows as well at certain times of the day or days of the week. You don't get those huge sort of peaks and troughs in the same way, which has obviously had an effect on easing congestion through the amount of traffic that's actually on a road at a particular time. So there's a number of factors, but I think the important thing to say here is that it is a combination of all of those things, and increase in electric vehicles, etc., and more vehicles on the road which meet the more stringent emission requirements, that's caused the pollution levels in a number of locations across our 2 districts, 2 boroughs, to be where we are at today.
Yeah, thank you for that context, Suzanne. Okay, I'm going to ask the clerk to read out the recommendations.
Yes, Chairman, certainly. Yes, so the recommendation for you is to approve the Crowthorne Air Quality Action Plan as set out in the appendix. Secondly, that the air quality management areas for Bracknell, specifically the A322 Downshire Way, Newbury A339 and Fatcham A4 be revoked.
Thank you, and I'm happy to propose that from the chair. Councillor Jeffries.
Yeah, I'm happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. And can I see those members in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. Okay, moving on to item 10, young people and vaping. And this is the last substantive item on the agenda. You'll be pleased to hear. So could I invite George to introduce it? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I hope everyone's had the opportunity to read this paper. So nicotine vaping is substantially less harmful than smoking, but it's not risk-free. For adults, it does provide an alternative to tobacco consumption. However, the effects on young people whose developing lungs and brains are most sensitive to its effects is not yet known. And furthermore, e-cigarettes contain nicotine, which is highly addictive and can harm adolescent brain development. And in addition, they may also contain other harmful substances. So the national data shows that the proportion of children experimenting with vaping has grown, and stating that they'd even tried it even though it's illegal to sell to under 18s. And this is reflected in the data within the paper of our own schools. Moreover, the current marketing of vaping includes easy access to vapes, appealing flavours, bright and inviting displays, and the risk of nicotine addiction are recognised factors driving the increased use of vapes in young people. And one example would be if you were to go online, you could see colourful Slurpee cups that are shaped like vapes, so clearly they're not aimed at adults. Such issues have prompted the central government to act, and it has been proposed that single-use vapes should be banned, as well as changing taxation laws for vape products generally to support the costs of enforcement. There is also the issue of responsible disposal. So as successful as Operation Tannock has been in our enforcement terms, and our own contribution towards surveillance work through initiatives such as Operation Joseph, we're starting to understand that the compliance is not a given, and even amongst those products that are considered approved for sale, we're still finding high levels of non-compliance. And then finally, we know that the government are planning further controls that will come to the council's public protection service, and we would be at the forefront of that implementation. Delivery, though, would be challenging, and there always will remain the challenges of competing priorities within the service. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Members, open this up for comments and questions. Councillor Jeffries.
Thank you, Chair. In section 3.22, under the non-compliance and the seizures, I'm interested to know, are the vapes tested on site, or are we making the seizures based on the labels that we see on the products? Hopefully that makes sense in where I was going with my train of thought.
Yeah, so the officers will go to the shops and they will pick a product and they will read the product, and then if it doesn't look, if it's a specific product that the intelligence has told us to go and get, that's what they would send off. But equally, they will also look at labelling in general, and if it looks like it's non-compliant, then that would be another area that they would consider. So you've got the composition again of the the product which we predetermine, but we've also got the labelling aspects.
Okay, and Sean?
Yeah, can I just add to that? So I think so in terms of an officer being in a premise, then they would go on the labelling, obviously, because obviously the grounds to seize product that officers have are on suspicion of non-compliance. So that would be the starting point before any further work was done on it. But what we have established with some of this enforcement work is there is a pattern that we're being told when we seize stuff from premises, where they're saying that basically people come round from premise to premise in vans and almost kind of place the product almost like a kind of sale and return basis. So there does appear to be some degree of organisation around basically how these products are distributed. But as George has said, the government have identified money, we've been told, basically for much more enforcement in the years to come.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just hoping we are looking out for nefarious individuals that are just relabeling them and make them look compliant. And we do know these vapes are produced in mass in China. And again, there's no regulation on what labeling they can put on their products, especially if they know they are trying to get them into our borders and to comply with our regulations. So just a note on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just on 3.25, where it says officers collected 13 samples in West Berks, 13 in Woking and 14 in Bracknell. And then it had a 70% failure rate. I mean, what are we doing about getting those failure rates out into the public so that they can make an informed decision about, are there, you know, is it Lost Marys that are failing more than you know, the gold one, for example? You know, they're different brands. I think we need more information about that 70% so that people can make an informed decision when they're going out. Because I find that figure staggeringly high, to be honest with you.
Yes, it is high. What we've found that the products that these failures relate to are products that are approved by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. So they're like bona fide product. And that's the big question at the moment. So we're working with regional trade standards services, speaking to primary authorities that manufacture, speaking to pretty much all of the you know, the interested parties, really, Department of Health as well, being informed. So there is a huge push to understand why this is the case, and also our test houses as well, and to ensure that there's consistency in testing. But yeah, it's a very high failure rate for such a small number, really, of samples.
No, absolutely.
Chair, can I just add to that this is part of a wider project, and we're just one of the authorities that basically there are three, and they are seeing similar rates basically of failure. And George alluded to the MHRA. I mean, effectively, we are working with them to look at this. But I mean, what this tells us, I think at the very least, is there are some concerns around quality assurance and quality control basically within the manufacture of these products, because they're not just kind of over, but there are actually quite a few that are under as well. But they're certainly not basically where they should be.
So we asked for this. I think Councillor Jeffries who asked for this item to come on the agenda. I think it'd be useful to have this as a standing item. Maybe I think what I'd quite like to see is that testing number and then broken down by what it failed on. I personally have slightly less concern if it's got a 4 mil chamber than a 2 mil chamber, because that's just buying 2 vapes anyway. You know, I mean, when I've vaped, and I still vape now, I've had various sizes of chamber of how much liquid. It's more what's in the liquid is more concerning for me, whether it's heavy metals or too much nicotine from what is publicising. But thanks, Councillor Allen.
Going back to the 70% failure rate, I'm just curious, is this related to the table in 321, 3.2021, where you know, you're saying the number of seized vape products? Is that because of the failures? Because it seems to be incredibly high in West Berkshire compared to Bracknell Forest.
No, so they're separate. They're separate operations. So the table relates to what we call Operation Tan Oak, and that was looking at the illegal product, whereas the 70% failure is for it's legal product, but they were just failing on content or concentration, things like that. So they were two separate projects.
I'm just wondering, George, so West Berkshire had nearly double the amount of premises of Wokenham and 4 times the amount of Bracknell, so you'd expect a higher number. But did we find a big stash in effect of
I think
we found one vape and then there was boxes of them in the storeroom, for example?
I think that's basically where we were. There were a couple of premises where there was some significance. I wouldn't read too much into the data between authorities. We're going to continue to do inspection work in these areas, basically. So, it could well be that going forward in the next quarter, there'll be significantly more inspections done, for example, in Bracknell than West Berkshire. So it's just the way that it's fallen to date. But yeah, I wouldn't read too much into the individual quantities.
And when do we start naming and shaming? When do we say this shop on this road has got a bad record of selling vapes? We have had at least one prosecution, I think, in the last few months, basically around vaping. I think there was publicised. There are a number of files with the case management unit, basically for decision, and those decisions could be anything from no further action through to warnings, formal cautions or prosecution. But the case management unit basically are reviewing those and the circumstances, what the people had to say, basically. But none of those actions, apart from the final prosecution, involve the public.
No,
it's okay warning the shop owner, but when do we warn the public not to use, or say that shop's on notice for having a history of selling dodgy vapes?
That gets very difficult, obviously. Where you've got convictions, it becomes it's straightforward. Basically, if it's in the public arena, that information is out there. But what we do is we provide, if you look at basically the information we do put out there, we provide a whole range of information to the public, and a lot of that is picked up by local media as well, isn't it? So, who's invariably the first question is which shop. But of course, at that point, basically, and if there's not any, if there's still the investigation going on, we're not unable to give too much detail.
No, okay, but if we've given a warning, are we not allowed to publish a list to say these shops have had warnings?
I would say that it would be very difficult. It is certainly something I can go away basically and ask the corporate legal team basically for a view on.
Just because members, for me, there's no point unless the public. It's about a public protection committee. It's about that saying to them, "Don't go there." But yeah,
totally agree, Chair. Same as we have those food ratings, right? For you've got food ratings. We do publish that. So I think we could be onto something here.
And hopefully, as we're in a national trial with only 3 other areas, maybe we can sort of set the way here for what we want public to be informed about.
There is one option, I think, basically, which to almost turn that on its head. Obviously, we're carrying out a lot of inspection, but you could almost have a compliance certification the other way round as a positive, which is something perhaps, if we're looking to bring back further reports on this subject, I think maybe we could perhaps look at any options around the issues that you've talked about in the forthcoming report.
Lovely. Thank you very much. We won't labour the point. Any other comments? Sorry, Councillor Gilby.
Thank you, Chair. 3.13 onwards, school and community engagement. A question, a comment. A question first. I just want reassurance that the team is cognizant that there's always a risk that if we push the message too hard in the wrong way, it could become counterproductive. So we were all teenagers once, and we all know that sometimes if a message is pushed too hard in the wrong way, if anything, you actually you get a certain instinct of rebelliousness, and you think, actually, I'll do it just because I want to rebel against this message being put too hard on me. So first of all, and answer that question, can I get that reassurance that we are aware that we do have to be very deliberate in how far we push this?
Can I pick that up if I can, George, if there's anything you want to add to it? Yep. But we have a long history now of working in educational settings around around age restricted products. So we've done an awful lot of work over the years around tobacco, around alcohol, and now more recently around the issue of vaping. And the very point you make is a very important one about how you place that messaging. Now, obviously, that there is different characteristics of the product which make it which make these things more difficult. So, for example, with alcohol, it's commonly used. Basically, it's out there and it's very common in society. With smoking, it was a much clearer message. That basically smoking is very, very harmful to your health, potentially. Or sorry, not potentially, but harmful to health. With this one, obviously, you've got a product which provides a solution for a lot of people as an alternative to smoking. But with young people, what we're trying to do is basically to encourage, I suppose, what you would call informed decision making. So the message is basically to get the information out there. Basically, it's not to say don't do this. It's basically this is what we know. This is what we don't know. These are the rules. These are the risks. Yeah, sort of adult conversation.
And then your second.
Funny enough, that links to the point that I certainly found that presenting something as stupid, for lack of a better word, rather than passing moral judgment, seemed to be much more effective for the causes that I was faced with growing up. Very quickly on the comment, I would certainly emphasise that I did see on one bit of draft promotion educational material that there was an attempt to try and adopt the language of the current generation, and again, being part of a generation where that was tried, sort of trying to
I think the connection has been lost to the room, hasn't it?
Has it?
They've gone.
It just said we are the host now.
Ah,
Does that mean I can go now?
they can.
You're the host, Suzanne.
Sorry?
You are the host.
I am now.
You're
You
the
said you
host.
on mine it said you were, Rosalind.
I've just sent a connection. I've sent a message to them. Said they lost the connection. So we're waiting to see if they put us back in. I don't know. I hope we don't have to join again.
I know it. That was the last item anyway, and it sounded like the end of the questions as well.
Let me text Stephen.
Vicky's just said that we are still online.
Let's see if he comes back. I might have to rejoin. I think I've just deleted the bloody link.
I think, Claire, we're still online.
They can't hear us, can they?
I think one of the officers has just messaged me to say that we are still online.
Oh God, what have I just done?